What's up, freaks? That's a little loud. Jose, you know who this is?
Nope.
This is the lead singer of one of the most overrated bands in the world, and a lot of people are going to hate me for saying that.
Who's the overrated band?
Radiohead.
Radiohead? No kidding.
This is Tom York.
I like the beat, though. Sounds good. Sounds dope.
Dope. All right, that's enough of Tom York. What's up, freaks? All right, I'm joined today by a good buddy of mine, Jose Pajon. Unfortunately, John wasn't able to join us.
Yo.
What's
Pajon, what is that? Pajón, coño.
Pajón. El pajón está aquí. Jose's here. We're going to talk a lot about Jose, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our relationship, and we go back quite a few years. And Jose, I really wanted Jose to be our first guest here on Talkbox because Jose is a really, really interesting dude with a lot of interesting things to say. And we're going to go over all that in detail. John, unfortunately, wasn't able to join us. He had a last minute, a work engagement. I was telling Jose before we started recording that I'm not really sure what John does. Every time I call him a pharmaceutical rep, he gets upset at me because he's really not a pharmaceutical rep. But I know he sells some sort of drugs or vitamins for I don't know, to cure herpes. I don't know what he does, man. But
maybe he sells weed in Colorado.
Maybe. Well, I don't think he does, because if he did, he'd be very wealthy right now, and he certainly wouldn't be doing our little podcast. But he's a good dude, man, and he's an important guy. So he's off doing his thing with his work buddies, and he'll be back next week. So that's it on John. We love you, brother. If you're out there listening, we love you. Jose, man, I came back from Boston. I just got back from Boston. Incredibly, incredibly cold.
Yeah.
Have you been to Boston?
I have not. I have never been to Boston.
Okay.
Yeah.
Boston is one of my absolute favorite cities in America. Okay. First of all, besides the cold, it's a very historic city. People refer to it as like the second or third most historic city in America. They've got the Freedom Trail. They got Bunker Hill over there. That's the site of the obviously the Boston Tea Party, the Boston Massacre,
the first false flag.
Oh man, you're already getting warmed up. You're already getting into it. The first false flag. I'm sure you're going to give us a lesson on that. That'll be good. Paul Revere, is very, very well known and respected.
Absolutely,
obviously in Boston. So it was a great, great trip. Spent a few days up there with the fam. Enjoyed the cold. My son got to do his first snowball, which was really cool, and he loved it.
How do you call that a snowball, dude? That was like a freaking monster ball.
It was a monster, because what happens is when you remove these pieces of snow / ice from these, from the snow that's basically accumulated over the course of the winter, they're just gigantic, man. And he lunged a few of them at me. That was one of the highlights of his trip. So,
and any yellow snowballs?
No, there were a lot of black ones. That stuff, when it starts accumulating over time, it turns into sludge. It's real nasty. But for those of you who haven't been to Boston, go. It's a great, great town. Awesome food. The clam chowder. According to my wife, I'm allergic to it, but according to my wife, the best she's ever had. So definitely make a trip out there. I'm always anxious though when I take these kind of trips or little vacations or whatever. I'm anxious about flying. Do you have that phobia? A lot of people do. I certainly am a freak about it. I can't do it.
I do a prayer every time I go up and every time I come down.
I do the same thing. I do the signal of the cross right before the thing goes up, and once it lands, I do the same. I'm thankful. I am absolutely petrified of flying. I hate it. It's kind of like a necessary evil, because you're not going to drive to Boston, right?
Right.
But it's absolutely scary. You heard about the sad news in France. Plane just crashed. Was it yesterday or the day before?
Yeah, into the Alps. And suspected terrorist attack.
Is it a suspected? I thought they had ruled all that out.
Yeah.
Put this thing closer to you, man, so we can hear it. We can hear all your.
Yeah, well, so from what I understand, at least what I hear in the media, they're trying to spin it into. I heard Hannity yesterday who was trying to spin it into. Well, we don't know yet. We think it's a terrorist attack. It's very strange how fast the plane dropped so many feet so fast, and this is a luxury liner, and it shouldn't have these types of problems and all that kind of stuff. So they were already spinning it like crazy. So my prediction will be that it will be some kind of a terrorist-related attack.
A terrorist attack. I disagree with you, as I will probably do often throughout this podcast. I don't know. I've been on a few flights where, because what I've read so far is that the plane descended. What was it, like 20 or 30,000 feet or 15,000? Just a huge number in a matter of minutes. I mean, it was like in 8 minutes it descended about something like 15 or 20,000 feet. And it crashed into the Alps at about 6,000. That's an extraordinary number to drop. Now, just to put that in perspective, I used to go on a lot of trips for paintball. Remember when I played paintball back in the day?
Yeah.
Well, I played competitively for quite a few years. And
what was the name of that team?
Many teams. I was on Rush, the Pirates, Body Count. We had so many goofy names. Cyclone. It was fun. I still go out and play every once in a blue moon. I haven't done it in a while. But the bigger point being, when I was playing competitively, a lot of times when you would go up with teams from Miami, one time we were coming back from a tournament in Chicago with Team Rage. You remember Rage?
Oh, yeah.
They used to be the Terminators, right?
That's right.
So we were coming back from Chicago. It was awful weather coming into South Florida. I mean, there must have been heavy rain starting as far north as West Palm Beach. And we're coming back, so it's each team consisted of 10 players, right? And these are all, pretty macho guys with their guns shooting each other, jumping and diving around in the woods, trying to kill each other. So it's a pretty macho sport. And the Terminators, or Rage, I forget which iteration of the team it was at the time. I think it was Rage. They were a professional paintball team. We were an amateur team, but we were both on the same flight. We're coming back, and we hit the roughest turbulence I've ever experienced. It was so bad that the plane would drop about, you'd see it go through these sudden drops of about 3 to 5 feet at a time.
Yep.
Now, that doesn't sound like a lot. But when you're on a plane and it's shaking and it suddenly drops about 5 feet, it will absolutely mortify you. And we were scared for our lives. I mean, there were grown men. I mean, all these professional paintball players on, everyone's on here, competitive players, tough guys. And this plane was tumbling around the air and dropping 3 to 5 feet at a time.
And they were like, "Mommy!"
Screaming for their lives, man. When I tell you, grown men scream, "We're gonna die!" I mean, it was absolute panic. I remember a couple of the overhead bins opened up. It was like a scene right out of a movie, and everyone was just pale white. That when that plane landed, everyone just erupted into applause. There were guys hugging each other. It was a scary thing, man. I would categorize it as an air emergency. It really was. Yeah. I mean, there's no way that couldn't have been categorized as anything other than that. And I was scared, man. I really thought I was going to die. I really did. And that did nothing but emphasize my fear for flying. It was terrible. So
I've been through some ugly turbulence, and I can tell you that I agree with you. It's definitely something that'll get your attention, and it scares the shit out of you. I was lucky enough to fly through some bad turbulence on my way to Atlanta, so it was a short flight. And the guy who was sitting next to me happened to be a pilot that was catching, to Atlanta, which one of the big ports, and so one of the big hubs, I should say. And he was like, "Look, don't even worry about it. This is not even a big deal. It's just, he was like, we're just flying through this area, and it's going to be some drops and things like that. But it's totally, the airplane can handle it. It's not a big deal." But what he mentioned to me, and what's the most important thing, is that we have an irrational fear of flying, right? Because you get in your car, and yet you are statistically far more likely to die in your vehicle than you will ever die inside of an airplane. Statistically speaking, there's very little chance that you're ever going to die in an airplane crash. So it's an irrational fear that people have, much like the irrational fear that we have of a terrorist attack. Mind you, in 9/11, we had 3,000 people die in the World Trade Centers. And when you actually do the statistical analysis, when you do the actuary analysis of how likely you are to die in a terrorist attack, or how likely you are to die in an active shooter situation, you're more likely to die from getting hit by lightning than you are ever to die through a terrorist attack, or that you are ever to die through an active shooter scenario. And yet, most of us are willing to give up our freedoms, go through all kinds of unnecessary screening, all kinds of stupid rules about how much fluid you can take inside of your bottles and all these types of things.
3.5 ounces.
3.5 ounces. Slave training. That's what it is. When you go through an airport, I want you guys to remember that you are being put through slave training. What you are being put through is a process of taking away your humanity and forcing you to become this subservient person due to your unrational fear of a terrorist attack that is not going to happen.
It's a good point, and we're gonna definitely dive into what you believe the government is doing, or whatever other interested parties are doing, in order to manipulate us and misdirect us and kind of create some of the irrational fear that you described. Just one more thing on this plane thing. For anyone that's interested, I'm kind of a glutton for punishment when it comes to the whole flying thing, because I have such an incredible fear about it. I wish I could knock myself out before taking a flight, because it's irrational. I know that it is. I know that it's the safest way to travel, but it still freaks me out. There's a website that I was just cruising around the internet. There's actually a website called planecrashinfo.com. All right. If you have a fear of flying, do not go on this website. So let me tell you what this website is, man. You can pull it up if you want right there in front of your computer.
Plane crash porn.
It's yeah, man. It's psycho porn. All right. Planecrashinfo.com. Let me tell you what this website's all about. They have every transcript that they've been able to recover from black boxes. They've got every transcript they've ever recovered posted on this website. And you can see the date of the flight, what the flight number was, and what the pilots actually said. In some cases where they were able to pull the sound. Hold on, I'm going to bring up the website because I'm going to read some of this stuff to you.
Can you sample it? Can you get it into the system? Can we hear it through here?
The problem is that most of it sounds really, really muddy. These are planes that were literally going down. So it's not super clear. It'll sound a lot clearer if you do it on your own. Okay, I just went on planecrashinfo.com. So, for example, what it does is it gives you the date that the plane crash happened, the airliner, the flight number, and the last words on the recording, just as a header. When you actually click on the date, it gives you the entire transcript. And again, I'm a glutton for punishment. I shouldn't be reading stuff like that because I'm already scared as it is. But there are some people that are interested in reading this sort of thing. If you're that guy, like me, it's kind of freaky. Check out this website. Like, I'll give you some excerpts.
So you're, in other words, you are feeding your fear of flying by watching fear porn on the internet.
100%. Except, well, I guess like regular porn, it's real. Okay. So I'm going to give you some excerpts of the last words uttered on some of these flights. Pacific Southwest Airlines, September 25th, 1978. Last words the captain said, "Ma, I love you." Let's see a few more of the ones.
1978.
Oh, it goes all the way to 2010. Even the guy that landed in the Hudson, his entire transcript is on here as well. Just a few of the interesting ones. May 1987, a Polish Airlines flight. Good night, we perish. Suriname Airlines, 1989, flight 764. That's it, I'm dead. These are last words. And then when you actually get into the transcripts themselves, you can see they all start out the same. It's eerie. Everybody's calm. And a lot of these pilots are true pros. I mean, they're amazing. And they are keeping it together until the very, very, very last minute. And you see them at the very last minute when you're reading through the transcripts, they have that come to Jesus moment where they're like, you know what? It's over. One guy, Atlantic Southwest Airlines in 1995, Amy, I love you.
There are no atheists in foxholes.
Write that down, ladies and gentlemen. Here's what the guy, what was the name of the pilot? The famous pilot.
Scully.
Scully, of course. U.S. Airways, flight 1549. His last words before the machinery cut off, we're going to be in the Hudson. That's incredible.
He landed that one, though.
He landed it, man. It was amazing. And then there's others that are it's just like vulgarities and just people, just saying all sorts of profanities. The last one they got in here, April 2010, Polish Air Force. Guys crashing, and it just says fuck. And, those were the guy's last words. I think you'd want to be a little more, I don't know, man. It's heat of the moment. Some guys, like I said, there was one guy that wished his wife, he told his wife she loved him. There's one guy here saying, Egypt Air, flight 1990, I rely on God. Those were his last words. So some people put a little thought into it. Other guys are just bitching and fucking screaming all the way down. It's mortifying. And then I'd say about a third of all these have the actual recordings. That I won't do. I will not listen to guys screaming and all that. Because when you actually pull up the transcripts, it says, it'll have in parentheses what you're hearing in the background. It'll say screaming, pilot screaming.
But this is the post-crash recordings or the pre-crash recordings?
No, these are the obviously the pre-crash. These are the what do they call them? The black boxes.
Right.
When they pull the black boxes, which apparently they should why don't they make the plane out of the black box material?
I've heard that forever.
Because the black box fucking survives every goddamn plane crash. Well. So this is all the black box material.
It would be too heavy. That's the problem.
Is that what it would be? I don't know. Those fucking planes look fucking heavy to me, dude. Anyway, check it out, guys. If you're interested in the macabre, planecrashinfo.com. Mortifying stuff on there, man. Kind of crazy. I hate flying. I don't know what else to say on that.
But you've made it back all right. It's an irrational fear.
It's an irrational fear.
Yes, it is. It's an irrational fear. Actuarily, you have a very small chance of ever dying in a plane crash. You're much more likely to die getting in your vehicle and driving down the street.
The voice of reason, my buddy Jose. Yeah. Jose is a friend that I've known for about 25 years. I've always considered him to be a real intelligent guy. Thought-provoking.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thought-provoking for sure.
We have had many a battle over Flanagan's chicken wings and beer.
That's true. That's true. With no declared winner at the end. It's always a draw, right?
Well, and that's the way it is in life in general.
That's right. It's always hard to prove right or wrong. But one of the things that Jose's always been focused on, at least more recently in our recent history, and we've known each other for, we went to high school together. So I was in high school. I started as a sophomore in 89. I met you in 1990. So 25 years we've known each other.
No, 89. I think I was in high school. I think I was already in HML in 89.
Were you?
I graduated in 92, so it was 3 years, yeah.
All right. So 25, 26 years, whatever it's been. Towards the latter part of our relationship here, you recently started getting into what I like to call trying to inform people about things that you believe to be true and accurate with regards to government manipulation and misdirection and some of the things that you perceive are happening right before our eyes that we're not really able to see.
Yeah, the slander would be to call me a conspiracy theorist,
which I always do.
Yeah, and that is a very powerful term nowadays. It's something that has obviously been used to categorize a certain subset of people and control the propagation of their ideas. But in reality, a conspiracy theory or a conspiracy theorist could be anyone. Indeed, even a scientist is a conspiracy theorist, because if you have a grasp of science and you have a different conclusion than what most people are currently prescribed as the rationed response to what is their interpretation of the environment. And if your ideas do not correlate with those ideas, and you're presenting this, let's say, for instance, I'll give you the electric theory of the universe. So there are people who have this idea of the universe, that there's an electrical connection between planets, and that the universe is controlled, indeed, not by a nuclear reaction inside of the sun, but instead that the sun is a big ball of electricity, and that each of the planets are connected in an electrical arc that is connecting all of the planets and include all of the universe together. This theory of this theory of the electric universe becomes it becomes a conspiracy theory, and it becomes a conspiracy theory because, of course, it's not something that's easily accepted by the mainstream science society. It's not what they're pushing right now. It's not what they see. But like with anything that you hear in the news, like for instance, cholesterol. Cholesterol is bad for you, right? Cholesterol is the worst thing. Salt is the worst thing for you. Salt creates high blood pressure. Well, we now know for certain that salt does not create high blood pressure. That there are some people who are sensitive to salt, but the vast majority of people are not. And no matter how much salt you take in, it will not give you high blood pressure. But for some strange reason, during the 90s, we all thought that salt gave you high blood pressure. Mm-hmm. Now, we were convinced, we were told that this was scientific evidence that salt created high blood pressure. But indeed, it's not true. Mm-hmm. Now we're told that cholesterol creates heart disease and creates all kinds of problems in your arteries. Yet your brain is made up of mostly cholesterol. And testosterone is made mostly from cholesterol. So cholesterol is something that is actually very necessary in your body. And it just so happens that as we have created these drugs that combat cholesterol, we also see this incredible increase in the amount of people getting Alzheimer's. And isn't it interesting how it's always targeted, these drugs are specifically targeted towards the older generations. And if indeed your brain is made of cholesterol, and you're taking a substance that creates a blockage of that uptake of cholesterol, and you're getting Alzheimer's sooner, there's some kind of correlation there. But that would be a conspiracy theory.
Right. And I think in fairness to you, we're all conspiracy theorists to a certain degree. Everybody's got a certain degree of conspiracy theorist in them. A great example is I've heard everybody at some point has said, yeah, for sure there's a cure for cancer, but the government isn't releasing it because there's too much money involved, right? That's a conspiracy theory.
Absolutely.
A lot of times people don't think about that, but that's 100% conspiracy theory. I happen to subscribe to that.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much the cancer one, but more like the AIDS one and some of the other, kind of
well, if you don't think that the government tightly controls how scientific research is handled, I highly suggest you get on Netflix and you search a documentary. Dr. Brzezinski, I think is his name, Dr. Brzezinski's documentary on Netflix. And you will see this doctor in Texas who was the first to create a type of medicine that cured cancer, stomach cancers and some types of brain cancers in stage 4 and stage 3 patients at a 40% rate. Now, if you see, and I'm a big proponent of science, even though most people would say that I am unscientific, but I'm actually quite to the contrary. I truly believe in science, and I believe in science in a very strict way. I don't allow myself to be manipulated by political science. And when I say this, I say we got to go with the statistics. We got to go with numbers, but statistics and numbers lie. But in any case, Brzezinski was able to show that with his I think it's hyperglobulin or some kind of a protein that he was adding into people, that he was able to reduce cancer rates by 40% in stage 4 and stage 3 cancers of the brain and of the stomach. And so they went to take away his. They tried to take away his medical license. The FDA did numerous things against him. If you see the documentary, you will see that the very patients that he cured were the ones who gave up their life savings to defend him in court. And the only reason that man was able to even get his documentary out was because of the people he cured. Of course, you'll never hear about this. This will never make it to the mainstream media. And
you said it's on Netflix?
It's on Netflix.
And what's the name of the actual program itself? Do you remember?
I know his name is Dr. Brzezinski,
mm-hmm.
and it's Dr. Brzezinski out of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
He's a doctor out of Texas. He's got a great documentary. It was a documentary filmed by them, the very same people. Like, it wasn't a professionally done documentary, but when you start to examine how the FDA, what they exist for. And it's like you said, your friend he's in big pharma, and we know other people who are in big pharma, and they represent these drugs. Well, we know for a fact that they take the doctors out to these extravagant lunches, that they take them on these special trips to go to these special conferences that happen to be in Hawaii or they happen to be in the Caribbean. And how convenient is it that this same doctor then, of course, is going to make sure that he writes scripts for this type of medicine. So we're in a pay-to-play system, and while you think that your doctor has your best interest at heart, no, he has his Hawaiian vacation. That's what he's
right. I've always hated that aspect of that industry, and I think a lot of the guys that are in that industry are kind of uncomfortable with it as well. It is exactly as you say, but besides the point, one quick point on Netflix. Netflix is an absolute vault of documentaries. There's some great stuff in there. As our podcast evolves and we get a little bit better at this, one of the things that I do want to introduce are segments. And one of the segments that I thought about introducing was rare documentaries on Netflix, and just kind of share them with people, because I've seen some amazing documentaries out there, and every time I bring them up in conversation with friends and family, they're like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, dude, it's on Netflix, and there's dozens and hundreds actually of documentaries on there that are incredibly enlightening. It's always good to listen and observe a different perspective, which is why I wanted you on the show. Like I said, and I can't emphasize it enough, I disagree with a lot of the theories that you're going to present today, but I think it's important to listen to them, and I think it's important to consider other people's points of view, because when we lose that and we become short-sighted and we just have this tunnel vision in the way that we operate our lives and we govern ourselves, I think that's extremely dangerous. There needs to be a voice of opposition, or at a minimum, a voice of question. And I think that's what you offer. And I think that's what like-minded people will offer. And I think it's important. I don't agree with it now. I'm not sold on it yet. Maybe I'll be sold by the end of this, but I'm not sold on it yet.
Well, I would hope that no one gets sold on anything, and that you do your own research and you take the effort and time into examining the reality that you think you exist in. And this is something that I constantly challenge people to do. Because I always say, and it's something that I used to use on Facebook a lot, I would say, this is the Truman Show. And the reason that I say that is because the Truman Show, if you take the time to watch the Truman Show from a critical standpoint, you will see that they are trying to communicate a message to you in that movie. They're trying to communicate a very deep message to you, and that is that you are true man. You are, there's no accident that the name of the title, the name of the person who's in the Truman Show, his name is Truman. He is the true man. Everything around him is fake, but he is the true man. And then of course, the guy who's in the moon, his name is Christoph, right? Which is Christ of. So he is the Christ of the true man. He is the one who is running the show. He is the one who's creating. He is the wizard behind the curtain. And so many of us don't realize how many times we're being manipulated by a wizard behind the curtain. How many times there is that we think that the reality that we are indulging in is a real reality, when in fact we are dealing with people who are trying to sway us into certain behavior patterns for their benefit, for their financial benefit. Because at the end of the day, and this is another thing that I always constantly say, is you follow the money, because the money tells you the truth.
Interesting. I want to give you a quick plug. Jose's also tried his hand at this podcasting thing. He put together one. Correct me if I got the title wrong. Nerds Took Your Lunch Money? Is that what you titled it?
Yeah, Nerds Took Your Lunch Money.
Okay, so if you go on YouTube and you search Nerds Took Your Lunch Money, Jose has a great podcast on there with, who's the gentleman that you did that with?
I did that with Erickson Harrell, and he is, believe it or not, he went to HML.
Okay.
And he's a police officer in North Miami Beach, and he happens to also be a Liberty Movement guy. He's big on InfoWars. I'm not big on InfoWars. I don't highly recommend InfoWars. Not that I say don't watch it. I think that I don't want anybody not to watch anything. I think that you should watch everything. But Always watch everything from a critical perspective. Don't allow yourself to be emotionally wrapped into anything that you watch on TV or anything that you listen to on the radio. Or, it's everything that you should be critically thinking about everything all the time.
Okay, so excellent. So if you guys have a chance to check that out, if you find some of the stuff that Jose is talking about here interesting, I do. Listen to his podcast, Nerds Took Your Lunch Money. Just look it up on YouTube. Really, really interesting. It's about an hour and a half. It's good stuff. Even if you don't agree with what the guy's saying, it's extremely entertaining and really neat. You've got a lot of cool clips on that too. You got a lot of cool movie clips and some stuff. Sometimes the truth is disguised or not disguised. It's right before your eyes. And I think that's some of the points that you're trying to make is that Hollywood is actually telling us what's going on and we don't even see it. And it's
hidden in plain sight.
Hidden in plain sight.
Yeah.
So far, most of the stuff that you said, I actually agree with a lot of the stuff you said. It's very sensible. Not that the stuff I'm going to bring up is completely unsensible, but I do want to bring up a few of the viewpoints that I guess people would consider a little more radical, just so that people can understand the entire scope of where we're going. I know you don't like to be labeled as a conspiracy theorist.
No,
I get that. What's the angst with that?
I don't have any problems with the moniker of conspiracy theorist.
Okay.
Again, I think that the word itself has been manipulated into having a negative, derogatory sense.
That happens. That's happened with Tea Party. The word Tea Party that term has been completely villainized. That group of people has been completely villainized.
And not just by the Democrats.
Right.
By the Republicans.
By their own party.
Yes.
By a lot of the moderates, by a lot of the rhinos that are kind of scared of these people. I'm not a Tea Party guy. I don't see a lot of fault in what they're trying to do and what they say, to be honest with you. They seem to be like hardcore libertarians, which I'm okay with. But they have been given a bad rap. Like they've gotten to the point in the mainstream media where they're almost ridiculed. Like if you're a Tea Party guy, you're almost...
Well, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that there will be things that will come out in the media in the next couple of years that will be Tea Party or libertarian or freedom-loving oriented anti-government, and there will be a sway and a very strong marketing effort to convince you that people who want freedom from government, that people who are anti-government, that people who are libertarians, that people who are Tea Party
are redneck idiots.
First are redneck idiots, and second are dangerous terrorists.
That's right. I never thought the day would come. I think we're already there, but the word patriot has almost been demonized in the mainstream media. I think that's dangerous. I think it's stupid. I think people that cringe when they hear someone refer to themselves as a patriot, if you're cringing at that, you're the guy with the problem.
Well, it's just like the American flag. You can't... right now, if you were to be in a classroom and they had the American flag in the classroom and you're pledging allegiance, they will almost make you feel ashamed that you're pledging allegiance to the American flag.
Yeah.
And there is a concerted effort. There is, and this is something that this is part of my conspiracy theory, and that is that there is a concerted effort towards a world government, that there is an effort to remove the shackles of previous programming, because believe it or not, while I'm telling you at the same time that there's this concerted effort to do this, that the previous effort was also manipulation. So the manipulation was for you to love your country and for you to promise your allegiance to your flag and all this kind of stuff. And that also, for me, from my perspective currently, was manipulation. This is just another level of manipulation. They've gotten you to the point where they want you. You've created this great society. Now they need to export that great society into the next level, which is world government great society. And it's definitely something that is headed our way. And for those of you who have not considered this, you should research Agenda 21. You should go into the United Nations documents that speak about Agenda 21, and you will see clearly how everything that is happening today was written into a document back in the 1980s.
It sounds almost like two sides of the same coin. The stuff that you're describing in terms of going from one extreme, a very patriotic extreme, to what I consider today being an almost anti-patriotic extreme. We'll get to that. I wanted to share some of your viewpoints on some of the more radical stuff, because that I find that really interesting. A lot of the stuff, again, that you've mentioned so far, I think people will vibe with it. They might not agree with it, but yeah, there's something there. But I want to talk about some of the extreme stuff and see if you still subscribe to it. Okay, so regarding 9/11, you believe that the U.S. government and private interests were involved in coordinating that attack. Is that true or false?
True.
Okay, let me just go through the list. There's only two more, and then we'll talk about them a bit. Regarding the Boston Marathon bombing, you believe the U.S. government coordinated that event and hired actors with missing limbs to portray victims. The actors had fake blood poured on them, and they were dressed in torn clothing to convey realism. True or false?
Welcome to the Truman Show.
True or false?
True.
True.
It's the Truman Show.
Regarding the Sandy Hook massacre, you believe that was a training exercise or some sort of hoax that was coordinated by the government, and that none of the children that were reported as having been killed actually died.
That is correct. And if you can show me one picture, if you can show me one autopsy report showing the pictures of those dead cadavers, then I will agree with you.
Okay, so so just so that the audience is clear, I'm not going to get into a debate with Jose about these different things. These are his positions, but I wanted to make sure that it was clear so that you understood just how far the rabbit hole goes in Jose's opinion, which again, we're being respectful and we certainly need to consider all these different things, but those are you have to understand why some people would hear you say, so let me get this straight. The government hired actors that were already missing limbs, threw fake blood on them, threw them in ragged clothing, and staged the entire Boston Marathon bombing. You can see where people would hear you say that and be like, you're completely fucking crazy, dude.
Absolutely. And if I was not aware of how extremely corrupt and how manipulative our government, and when I say our government, I don't want you to think that I mean the whole government. Because I'm not talking about the guy that works at Social Security. I'm not even talking about your local low-level FBI officer. What I am talking about is a subset of people at the very highest echelons of government who are combined with an effort to manipulate the mindset and the political ideology of the populace to further the goals of a world government situation.
So is Barack Obama involved in this?
Barack Obama is most certainly involved.
Barack Obama is involved. Is Congress involved in this?
Congress would be involved, not at every level of Congress, but there will be congressmen who will know. There will be senators who will know. But it's not something that is going to be shared among all of the congressmen and senators.
So okay, great. So one of the terms that you use throughout your podcast, and one of the terms you've used with me a lot when we've had these discussions, has been the term false flag. For those people that are listening who don't know what false flag is, what that term specifically means, can you give us a little insight on that?
So we'll start with what we started with the show with. Okay, so we have the Boston Tea Party. And what the Boston Tea Party is basically a bunch of Masons who had just finished a Masonic meeting said to themselves, we want to start a revolution against the King of England. And what they did to start that revolution was board a ship dressed as Indians and summarily take the tea and throw it into the bay. And the purpose of this false flag was, of course, to protest the unfair taxes that were being levied by England on the United States. The reason the people in the United States were extremely unhappy with the taxes is they were like, well, hey, we're paying all these taxes and we don't get shit back for this tax. And they were and the people in the United States were becoming extremely wealthy.
Taxation without representation.
Right. Well, and more, you know what? It's not even taxation without representation, although that was their battle cry. It was more that they finally realized that without the overarching structure of society on top of them, as they had landed on this new world and were able to become true capitalists without any type of control on top of them, that they were able to create and amass this immense wealth. And that, my friends, is really the key to control. In society, throughout history, there have been people, the same people, who have always sought to control your ability to think, your ability to create, your ability to endeavor, your ability to make real what is not. And those people, they live off of your work, and they live by keeping you subservient to them. And the King of England, and of course the monarchies in Europe, were definitely part of that. The dukes and the whole system. There was this whole system that was created, and the people who were actually doing the work, the people who were actually the ones responsible for creating the economy, were always the ones kept at the very bottom, and the people at the top were people who weren't doing shit.
Okay. So a false flag is a ruse, which would mean, and correct me if I'm wrong in my understanding of what the false flag terminology represents. 9/11 wasn't a false flag, but the Sandy Hook massacre was. Would that be a true statement?
No, 9/11 was a false flag.
9/11 was a false flag. Okay, yeah. Then I'm not getting the term false flag correctly.
The purpose of the false flag is a psychological operation to create or to endear support for a cause that otherwise you could not get support for. So
what was the cause on 9/11 that the government, at the time, I guess it would be George Bush and Cheney and all these clowns, right. What was their goal by coordinating the murder of 3,000 Americans?
Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, the Sudan, Libya, Syria.
Those are all countries. Iran. What was the gain, though? Help me understand the gain.
Their gain, or their goal, or what their agenda is first to subdue an area of the world that has not previously been civilized. Right. So they want to create a civilization in the Western term of civilization. They want to be able to manipulate those countries with their ideologies and their think patterns. And more importantly, they want to control the flow of the most important resource on the globe, which is oil.
Most important resource for now. But in retrospect, that was a completely failed mission, because Iraq is in shambles. Afghanistan is
not a failed mission by any stretch of the imagination. Okay. It's actually a huge success for them.
Well, their goal was, according to what I thought I heard you say, was to implement a Western type of infrastructure in the Middle East. Is that a true statement?
That's a true statement.
Okay. There's no westernized infrastructure in Iraq right now.
There absolutely is a westernized infrastructure in Iraq. The Green Zone itself is like visiting any small town or any small city in the United States. If you go to the Green Zone in Baghdad, you will feel like you are in the United States of America. You will not feel like you are in Baghdad.
What experience do you have to justify to support what you just said?
Luckily for me, I have plenty of friends who were in Iraq, plenty of friends that were in Afghanistan. So I have people who have given me firsthand testimonials of their experiences while they were there. Now, we're not talking about people who are conspiracy theorists. We're talking about people who just serve their country. They're very patriotic. As a matter of fact, some of these ideas would shatter them if they found them out to be true. So they cannot accept a lot of these theories because, as you heard in my podcast, the ego is a very precious and delicate thing, and it will defend itself in all instances. And when you are presented with information that makes you look the fool, that where you have sweat blood, where you have lost friends, you will protect that ideology at all costs, because you cannot accept that you have been fooled to such a degree that would create this, that would make your sacrifices or your efforts so meaningless.
Right. Okay, and we're going to talk about ego. Actually, that was one of the notes that I had made from your podcast that I was interested in you elaborating a bit more on. But just to be clear, so you said that there are portions of Iraq, this green zone specifically, that resembles the United States.
Iraq is right now in a massive transformation, in a westernized transformation of infrastructure. We have invested billions of dollars into Iraq to create new energy systems. We were very smart that when we attacked Iraq, we made sure to destroy their electrical infrastructure. We made it seem like if it was a mistake, oops, we launched these bombs that destroyed their whole electrical grid and everything else. But in reality, there was a plan, and there is a plan, a constant plan that the Western governments have, which is called which I like to call the rubblization plan. And what it means is that we will go in, we rubbleize a country. First of all, we only rubbleize a country that does not play with us. So Iraq, conveniently, was rubbleized as soon as they started saying that they would not accept dollars for oil. The moment that they said that they would not accept dollars for oil, the United States government turned around and started to find ways to find problems with Iraq and with the sanctions that they had in place. And finally, during 9/11, they were able to spin it around completely and make it into a war against Iraq when Iraq had nothing to do and had never any ties with Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and all the other BS that you ate up, and you supported this war and you allowed people to go and die for, and not to mention the Iraqis themselves, which you funded their death, all for the purpose of controlling the oil in Iraq and the systems of delivery of oil for the world, because that is the truth of how our economy is sustained. And that is why we are live on a different level from the rest of the world, because we are indeed funded and subsidized by the rest of the world by something that's called the petrodollar.
Mm-hmm. So just to recap, so we needed to murder 3,000 American citizens in a very, very dramatic manner, by the way, in order to achieve this goal of westernizing the Middle East. There are, and I know that you know this, but there are some guys running around in Iraq right now that are raping and pillaging and taking over huge, massive territories in the country. At all costs necessary. Very violent guys.
ISIS?
ISIS, yeah. Okay, so your laugh implies what?
My laugh implies that ISIS, it's interesting, right? So we, about a year and a half ago, we were having this discussion about how we were trying to invade Syria because they were using chemical weapons against their own people. And me and you had this huge debate on Facebook about the fact that the Syrians were using chemical weapons, and that we, the United States, needed to go in there and handle the situation for them, because they, that was completely unacceptable.
I never said the Syrians were using chemical weapons.
Well, that was our debate. My debate was that we were the ones actually that had launched the chemical weapons.
The debate was that you were saying, and all I was contradicting was that you were saying that Obama was going to invade Syria. Which never happened.
Which did not happen, and the only reason it didn't happen, and let's all remember, let's go back in our memory banks. So the Syrians were using chemical weapons according to us. Now the rest of the world did not see it that way. But we here in the United States were constantly bombarded with the idea that the Syrian government was gassing their own people. Mm-hmm. Then later on, Harvard comes out with a study that says absolutely not. By no means was the Syrian government gassing anybody. It was the rebels, and there's no way that it could have been the Syrian government. This is Harvard that came out with this study. Not me, not Jose Pajón, the conspiracy theorist. This is Harvard. So Harvard comes out and says this. And so before Harvard comes out and declares all of this, of course, Vladimir Putin got involved and cock-blocked the war in Syria, and basically John Kerry made a stupid ass speech about how the chemical weapons needed to be controlled, and so Vladimir Putin came in and said, "Hey, you know what? We'll get involved with Syria and we'll be the middleman and we'll control their chemical weapons." And of course, that ruined the plans that the United States had to go into Syria, because it is part of our agenda. And for those of you who don't think that there is an agenda, There's this guy who ran for president called Wesley Clark, a Democrat, a general. He's a very highly decorated general, and he has, and if you search on Google the Wesley Clark 7, you will see a speech where he comes out and he says, not too long after 9/11, how the United States government had a plan to invade Afghanistan, to invade Iraq, to invade the Sudan, to invade Somalia, to invade Yemen, to invade Libya, to invade Syria, to finally finish with Iran. So what I'm telling you may sound like a conspiracy theory, but my conspiracy theories are backed up by statements made many years ago by generals inside of the United States government. So what I'm telling you is you follow the money. And while we didn't go into Iraq to steal their oil, we went into Iraq to make sure that they traded their oil in dollars. And that is how we sustain our economy. We sustain our economy by making sure the rest of the world respects the dollar.
One of the things that you mentioned in your podcast was that in your opinion, one of the barriers that keeps people from really analyzing some of the stuff that you're saying further is ego. And you referred to it a short time ago. Talk to us a little bit more about what you mean in reference to ego and the type of barrier that it poses for us.
Well, the ego is a part of you that seems like your best friend. And for most people, you have these internal conversations on the daily. So maybe you go to the supermarket and you see a hot girl, and in your mind, you might say to yourself, "Damn, she's hot," right? And you might say to yourself, "Well, she's like an 8," and you might think, "Well, if my buddy was here, he would definitely be checking her out." Or you might think to yourself, "Damn, if my wife saw me doing this, or is there anybody looking at me?" So everyone is having these conversations inside of their heads all day long. And most of us don't realize where this other voice resonates from. Most of us think it's us. We think that we're having this conversation with ourselves. And Freud aptly described 3 sections of our personality: an ego, superego, and an id. And this is a concept which I don't necessarily agree with the ego, superego, and id, but I definitely agree with the designation or the naming of this voice, because in a lot of ways, the voice is having a conversation with you and convincing you on many levels of things that you should and shouldn't do. So the voice might tell you, "Don't get on that plane, you're going to die. Don't get on that plane, you're going to die. No, I got to get on this plane, I got to go fly. Don't get on that plane. That plane is very dangerous." So the ego can manifest itself in your fears, in your greatest fears, and it can keep you from achieving the things that you want to achieve in life because of these fears that you harbor. And the ego knows what your fears are. The ego is, in many ways, your best friend. He is he or she is the person that kind of guides you in life from doing the things that you want to do, but that you otherwise would be too afraid to do. Or sometimes the ego keeps you from doing something that you should have done, like maybe you should have gotten on stage and you should have, gave that presentation, but you chickened out because the ego was telling you, "You're not good enough. You're not going to do it. You're going to get up there. You're going to look like an ass. Don't do it. Don't take that chance. It's better to sit in the audience like everybody else and just conform. Don't worry about it. At least this way you won't get picked on." So there is in most people's minds this assumption that voice that's in their heads is themselves, and that person. That conversation is a conversation that they are having with themselves. I am of the opinion that the ego is actually not part of you, that it's an external voice, and it's an external voice that is part of the reality that you exist in, and it is the Christoph of the reality that you exist in. It is helping to manipulate on another level, on a spiritual level, your acceptance of the way that things are, and your acceptance of how broken things are. And if you were able to finally achieve freedom from the ego, that I think that you would reach another level of enlightenment, and you would break the bonds of control that many things in society have over you.
Interesting. So it's ego, in your opinion, it's ego that prevents us from seeing these things, which apparently to you are very obvious. We are being manipulated, and these events are unfolding as almost as they've been prophesized by, former generals and even history to a certain degree. According to what you're saying, we've seen it. We've seen these false flag events, taking place going back to the Boston Tea Party, all the way through 9/11, all the way through Sandy Hook. It's ego because we're afraid to want to come to that realization. It's ego that's preventing us from doing it.
I think in many ways that it is our ego, and that we have to first be one of the things that, and I'm not saying that you have to first do this, but I think that one of the things that once you realize, once you come to the conclusion and you internalize the fact that there is an additional voice inside of your head, and that voice doesn't make you crazy, that the fact that you are able to identify that voice and isolate that voice, congratulations, you have now entered another level of consciousness. This is a level of consciousness that people would hide themselves in monasteries and not speak for 40 years or for 20 years to come to these realizations. You are building upon the initiated history, hidden history of mankind trying to come to grips with who he really is and why he is really here. Most people are not ready to come to grips with that existential question. Why am I here? Most of us think, we're just here and we're going to live and we'll enjoy and we'll fuck and we'll screw and we'll drink and we'll have parties and it'll be what it'll be. But if that's all that life is to you, grasp that for a minute. The whole of reality does not support your individual desires. It doesn't support that in the sense of a greater meaning to life. So look around you, look at the world around you, base yourself in nature first and in the natural world, and then from there you can come to discernment of how life, why you are here, what are you here for. In my opinion, in my humble opinion, we are all here to love each other, and for nothing more than that. And the ego's purpose is to separate you from loving your fellow man. And we were just talking about that before we got on the mics. We were talking about how people make themselves sick because they don't want to let go of a hurt that somebody did to them, and that they don't want to let go of something they've done to someone else, and they don't want to accept that as bad. They want to say, well, I had to do that. I didn't have a choice. I had to do that because if I didn't do that, then so and so this would happen or this would happen. So I had to make that choice. And for me, that battle is the ego. The ego is the one that's telling you had to make that choice. You did the right thing. You defended your family, or you preserved your wealth, or if you wouldn't have made that choice, you wouldn't be where you are today. That's the ego talking to you.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like you're describing the little devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder, and you can choose which one is ego, but it definitely seems to be one of them in accordance to what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's why I'm sad that your friend isn't here today, because I know he's an atheist, and so I would like to have had the opportunity to kind of get into his worldview, because I think the majority of us experience life. And when we come to that realization that there is this conversation being had, and we kind of know that there's this like little angel and this little devil kind of telling you both sides of the thing. Well, where do atheists think that those ideas come from? That's for me is like the number one question. Is that forget about evolution, or forget about all the other scientific paradigms that explain or support the ideas of atheism. But get into the real psychological aspects of the soul and the soul experience in life, and how if you feel like that you don't have a soul, or if you're atheist and you feel like this experience is a transient experience where it's just electrical signals and chemical reactions, and at the end of the day you're dirt farm, you're just worm food. There is nothing else. Well, how do you correlate that? How do you reconcile that with this immense reality that you have existing around you, that you are still better than the existing reality around you? Like your ability to think and your ability to create is still above everything that you see in front of you.
Yeah, it's funny. Every time I have those types of discussions with atheists, and I've had them with John many times, I always, they always pride themselves as being on the side of science, and they always use science as their benchmark for supporting all of their ideology, right? But I always tell them science is the reason that I have faith. It's because of science, because I understand that if the planet was 2 degrees off of its axis, there would be no way to sustain life on Earth. I understand. There's a reason we haven't found life anywhere else in the universe. I know anyone, and I know I'm in the minority on this, but because I used to think for sure there's got to be, mathematically speaking, the odds say that there's got to be life on another planet in another galaxy or whatever the case may be, another solar system, whatever. We have the ability now to see light years out, and we've found. Every day we must find 100 planets. Every single day. Our scientists and NASA and all these guys are making incredible discoveries. You know what they haven't found yet? Life. I think there's a reason for that. As I get older and I start really analyzing these things, I think there's a reason for that. The only way that life is sustainable on Earth is because of the perfect mathematical equation that puts our planet at a specific distance from the sun, which allows, and the moon's relationship with the Earth, which affects the tides, which affects our climate, it's such a perfect harmony that there's an intelligent design behind it. And
the circle of life,
and it hasn't been found anywhere in the universe. I'm not saying that it'll never be found, but I've actually gone from one extreme of thinking there's got to be life on other planets to another extreme of thinking now I really do think we're it. I think we're it. We have a tremendous amount of technology now. We haven't found anything. I want to switch gears real quick because there's another term that you hear a lot, and I wanted to get your take on it. Earlier, we talked about Obama and possibly members of Congress and some of these high, elite level politicians and executives that exist in our government and in our private enterprise, who seem to manipulate, world events to our favor. By our favor, I mean a first world country like the United States, because that seems to be, according to what you've said and what I've understood, that seems to be the primary motivation. There's a term called Illuminati. I hear this term a lot. I've heard it for a very long time. And in an effort to try to understand it, I don't think that what you've described in the president and his administration and all these guys that seem to wield a lot of power, I don't think that's the Illuminati, if that's a real term. So my first question would be, do you believe there is such a thing as the Illuminati? And if there is, the second part would be, what is the distinction between them and these seemingly powerful politicians that are making these incredible decisions that impact the entire globe?
Well, okay, so the Illuminati is, of course, it was a society created in Austria by a former Jesuit that decided after being exposed to the teachings of the Catholic Church and going through seminary training, and he was also a contemporary of Loyola, which was the founder of the not the Franciscan order, of the I can't think of it right now.
You have the internet in front of you, man.
Yeah.
Type that bitch up.
Loyola was he created. What happened here?
Worry not. So Loyola. So we can look him up. So this guy named Loyola. Uh-huh.
Loyola was the one who created the Jesuits.
Okay.
The Society for Jesus, and the Jesuits are basically the current Pope is a Jesuit, and he's the first Jesuit, the first person to be, or first priest to be from the Society of Jesus to become Pope. And why is that important? Or why is the Society of Jesus important? Why is this guy who created the Illuminati and went to a seminary with Loyola important? And also, it also happens to be that I think it was Calvin that was also, or not, maybe not Calvin. I'm sorry, it was Martin that was part of the same group of men who went through the same seminary in France. And so there was the Reformation that grew from that. There's the Society of Jesus that grew from that. And there's the Illuminati that grew from that. And the Illuminati is basically a devil-worshipping or Satan-worshipping organization.
Here we go.
Yeah. And so when we get to say, and I think of the world in terms of a spiritual battle, and that there is this spiritual battle between the Satan, which is for me in my understanding now, is the ego, and Jesus Christ, which represents the id, and the superego would be God, and God encompasses both the id and the ego, because God created Satan, right? And so, what is God? Well, God is the singularity. God is where everything came from. And what are we now? We are the reflection of God. God has basically divided himself into this reality that we look around us to experience love by creating different versions of himself. So I'm looking at right across from me, there's God, right? Alex is God, and I'm God. But I'm not God by myself. But the Illuminati have been able to take advantage of a weakness in the code of God, and that is that we are each God. So if we are each God, and if we were to finally and truly understand the power of that promise that we are each and every single one of us God, and we were to take that to one extreme of ego, we would be able to capture a great amount of experience in the world. And so what does it mean to be illuminated? Because really that's what the word Illuminati means. Illuminati means the illuminated ones, and their illumination comes from knowledge. So they feel that knowledge illuminates them, and that their superior knowledge, or their knowledge above and beyond what the normal man knows, their hidden knowledge, is what illuminates them and before everyone else. So this takes us back, of course, to the beginning of Genesis, where Satan brings Adam and Eve to the tree of, or Eve to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Well, most people read that and they're like, good and evil. They concentrate on the words good and evil. But in reality, you shouldn't be concentrating on the words good and evil. You should be concentrating on the word knowledge. He brings Eve to the tree of knowledge. So Eve had never tasted from the tree of knowledge. Eve was exposed to the tree of knowledge. Regardless of good or evil, she was exposed to knowledge. And that was Satan's initiation. He exposed Eve to knowledge. So in terms that everyone can understand, when you see a magician on stage doing a magic show, and you cannot figure out how in the world he was able to saw somebody in half, how he was able to make a Toyota appear, how he was able to do all these things. Well, at the end of the day, we all know that there are certain rules of science that apply to everyone, and we cannot summarily defeat those rules of knowledge, or those rules of science. So they are using knowledge that you don't have. That's how they're able to accomplish it.
So you're saying they're like warlocks?
No, I'm saying that they have access to scientific knowledge that you do not have access to, and that because they are more knowledgeable, it would be the equivalent of if you took this computer, right, and you were able to go back 30 years, right, and you're sitting in a business meeting, right, and you have this computer in front of you. Nobody and everybody else is sitting in front of you.
You have a leg up on everybody.
Right.
I got it.
And so for everybody in the room, you're a fucking genius. Mm-hmm. How does this guy know all of this shit, right? But you're not really a genius. You're not special. You weren't born with special powers. You're just using technology that other people don't know about. You have knowledge, you have access to knowledge that they don't.
So who's providing them with this knowledge? Satan?
Satan is For me, Satan is the creator of the reality that we exist in. So we exist in a reality.
So not God, but Satan.
Satan is the creator of our reality on everything that is above the natural world. So when I say that, this house that you live in, right? This house that you live in, the furniture, the car that you drive, the glasses that you wear, the microphones that we speak into, this is all Satan's world. And the natural world that exists without all of the technology is God's world, is what God created. Everything above that is Satan's world. Or if you, like, say, for instance, if you watch the movie Noah, the one that just came out, and you'll see that Tubal Cain, right? Tubal Cain represents human beings who have taken technology and created incredible things, but they're savage beasts, but they've used technology, right? They created technology. Here is Noah, and Noah doesn't use any technology, right? Noah counts with God and with the natural world. So you are seeing a story that's a very deep story that unless you're initiated into the knowledge base, you will not understand what you are watching. You think you're watching some kind of action flick about the Old Testament, and what you are really seeing is a battle between the two forces that exist in our universe, the forces of knowledge and reality, and the forces of God and the source. And so when I say that in your head you're having this conversation with the ego, I want you to understand that it is possible for you to have a conversation without words. It is very possible for you to have a conversation without words. If you were to concentrate on, like what the monks and the yogis and everyone else has throughout the centuries tried to do, which is isolate yourself from the rest of the world, you will find that it's still possible for you to communicate without using any words. Now, you're not going to communicate.
You mean through like mental telepathy or something?
No.
Okay.
I mean through the methods of interpretation, of body language, of signaling, of different types of forms of communication.
Sure. Well, that's fairly common knowledge, though.
Right. But what's not common knowledge is that when you invest yourself so heavily into communicating in words mostly, that you are actually manipulating yourself by using technology. That words themselves are technology. That the story of the Tower of Babel, or Babel, right? Because Babel means blah, 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 to Babel, right? The story of the Tower of Babel is a story about how the technology of communication, of the words that we use, is seen, and from God's perspective, as something evil. And the reason that it's seen as evil is because it leads us away from having a relationship with the source on a level that doesn't require words.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a good background. I want to get back a little bit more to some of the stuff you said earlier regarding Illuminati. So I want to be clear. The Illuminati, whoever these people are obviously very powerful. Yes. They have a leg up on us, and by us I mean the general public. Yes. Not saying you or me, just the general public. They have a leg up on us because of this technological, knowledge that they have, which supersedes anything that apparently that we're aware of.
Yes.
Are people like our current administrators, our current politicians, our president, our congressmen, are these people that are privy to that? Are they involved in any way? Or is the Illuminati a completely separate group that is able to control these particular individuals based on this advantage that they have, technologically speaking?
Yeah, and these people that you see, the vast majority of them are not members of the Illuminati in the truest sense that they are. People like Jay-Z and Kanye West and Beyonce are puppets, and Barack Obama and many of these people. To be a member of the Illuminati, it requires first of all and foremost a bloodline tracing. So it's very much like a mafia. They want to know that your blood is from Sicily. Well, to be part of the Illuminati, your bloodline has to trace back to Cain. And so, and you're saying, how the hell are you going to trace your bloodline back to Cain? Well, I don't know if you remember the story in the Bible where Adam and Eve they fall from grace, right? They ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They have 2 sons. One of the sons is named Cain. The other son is named Abel. And then Cain kills Abel, right? When they grow up and Cain kills Abel because he's jealous of the fact that Abel was able to give God an offering that came from the land, whereas Cain used technology to make the land give him much more than what Abel was able to get. But God was not happy with Cain's offering. And so Cain became jealous of Abel, and Cain killed Abel. These allegories, when you read them on the surface, seem really stupid to most people. But how I just finished explaining to you the background, now the story makes a lot more sense. When you start watching movies with this different perspective in your mind, you start to understand that these directors are communicating a message to you far beyond what you think is a silly little story that you're watching in The Truman Show or in Noah or in Star Wars, which is one of our favorites back from when we were kids. And obviously, and we can get into destroying Star Wars for everyone shortly.
No, I don't want to do that, but I do want to circle back to something that we were talking about earlier with regards to the Middle East, because if I remember correctly, you had mentioned that the actions that are being taken in the Middle East in an effort to westernize that particular region are being dictated by the people in charge right now, which we had identified as Obama, or in the case of Iraq, it was George Bush and Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld and all these other guys, right? If I'm understanding you correctly now, those are just puppets. The real guys that are pushing the buttons and maneuvering the levers are actually, in fact, the Illuminati. It's not the administration. The administration is merely a vehicle for these very powerful people who are the ones who are, in fact, trying to westernize the Middle East. It's not George Bush. It's the people that control him. Is that a true statement?
That is an absolutely true statement. So the people who are behind the scenes, the Rockefellers of the world, the Brzezinskis.
That was my next question. Can you name, and I guess you've named 2, can you name members that you believe are members of the Illuminati? You mentioned the Rockefellers. These are the Illuminati. The Rockefellers?
The Rockefellers would be definitely one of the families that would be considered in the chain of the Illuminati.
And they have bloodlines that trace back to Cain.
And they have the bloodlines that trace back to Cain. Obviously, most of the European royalty, the Arabian royalty, the African royalty, everybody who's considered to be royalty, Japan and China. There's these people who were previous royalty. It's funny because we know that in the story of Cain and Abel, when Cain kills Abel, God gives him a punishment. He gives him a scar that designates him as for what he did, right? So it's the scar of Cain, and he makes it so that whenever he works the land, he will produce nothing from it. So it's his curse. His curse is that whatever he does to try and produce from the land, that God will never give him any production. And this curse, then Cain says, well, if you curse me like this, people will just kill me when I'm out, and then God says, well, if somebody kills you, then I will return it sevenfold, and that kind of thing. This Cain character is very interesting because if we were to extrapolate using critical thinking, people who are not people who do not work for any real intent and purpose, right? They are not workers. They don't do any real work in the world, yet they live very well. Who would those people be?
People who don't work, but they live very well. Anyone who lives off of the financial sector. Anyone who's...
Any bankers, right?
Any bankers, Wall Street guys, right.
So the banking industry is full of people who live off of that. And then royalty, right? Royalty would definitely be that because they don't do any real work. I mean, they're just, actors.
Right. The Queen of England isn't working.
Right.
We get it.
The Queen of England is not working, and neither are the princes, and neither is the king of
Saudi
Holland,
Arabia or whatever.
King of Saudi Arabia. None of those people are working, and neither are any of their relatives. And so I believe that there is this bloodline that derives from Cain, that runs through society and through humanity, and that these people who can trace their bloodlines back to Cain are considered real royalty, are the real royalty of the world.
So what do these guys have? They have like meetings? I mean, what are they? They meet up together and they decide the fate of the world? How does that work?
No, I think that that they actually, it's quite the opposite. I think that they are in groups, right? They're all in groups aligned with each other, and their allegiances shift from time to time, and they're basically playing a huge game of Monopoly with us, and they're each vying for their particular share of the game. But the rule is you don't kill another person in the Illuminati. You know, you can kill all of their freaking people, their vassals, and you can destroy their property, and you can do, but you're never kill somebody that's in the Illuminati. And it's the same thing with the mafia, right? You cannot kill somebody who's made. You know, you have to get instructions from the very top council to be able to kill someone who's made. And in this society, I believe that the situation is very similar. That the people who are at the very highest echelons of that group, they don't kill each other. They play with the world's economies, the Russian elements, the Eastern elements with China and everything else. They're all vying for world dominance. Who's going to be that one world government? Who's going to be at the end the powerhouse that runs them all? One ring to rule them all. Who's going to hold the ring?
Oh, that's from Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, Saturn.
So I'm not going there. There's so much to talk. Honestly, man, I can talk to you for hours about this kind of stuff, but I want to make sure I cover a few more things. There's a group that's been gaining a lot of traction. I would say going back to about 2005, 2006, you heard of them, and they're getting bigger and bigger. And I want to know if there's any relationship, in your opinion, between this particular group, which is anonymous, and the Illuminati. Are they puppets as well? It's a very, very interesting movement. Obviously, driven and strengthened by technology. They're completely technologically based. They refer to themselves as Legion. You'll hear that term a lot. The anonymous group is Legion. Nobody knows who these guys are. They wear the funny masks from V for Vendetta and all these other things. I bring them up because I'm starting to see them take a very strong position from a social perspective. Initially, they were just basically, computer hackers, right? And now they've they've given themselves a self-importance that nobody really assigned to them. They seem to have assigned it to themselves for taking on the responsibility of addressing, I guess, what they would perceive as social injustices or social misdeeds or misbehavior. A good example of that is Kanye West. They released a video about a week and a half ago. It got a lot of traction. It went viral. I want to play a couple of clips from that video because I think that whoever the guy, obviously the guy in the video doesn't reveal himself. They are true to their name, anonymous. But he says a lot of interesting things that I want to get your take on. So let me play this clip, and then we'll talk a little bit about our friends Anonymous and what their role is in this whole thing. 1 second.
You see, Mr. West, we once had a great deal of respect for you. We admired your art, creativity, original vision, and non-conformity in your work. But now, Anonymous has targeted you here with this message because you disgrace what we stand for. When you self-proclaim to be a modern Renaissance prodigy in your radio and TV interviews, with such an obnoxious history, it pisses us off. We watch the things you say and the way you depict yourself. You are not anywhere even close to the status of any of our brothers and sisters who made the Renaissance period what it was. I think it's time to awaken from your insanity, Mr. West. In reality, you're not a Renaissance man, you're just a new slave that the industry uses to help keep the population in a cycle of stupidity and distraction. Yes, you are an artist, but your example is still no different from the rest of Hollywood's figures, just programming the American youth to center all their attention on sex and material growth. The historical men who made the Renaissance era impactful had actually done things to revolutionize the way we think and understand our world. Many of them were sentenced to death because they dared to tell the truth and stood up to the powers who used fear to repress the truth from the people. You on the other hand have changed nothing. Yes, we acknowledge all your talent, Mr. West. But we also acknowledge that you have a large voice, bank loads of money, and a strong following, and no one man should have all that power.
Okay, that last line is one of my favorites. No one man should have all that power. All right, so there were a couple things that were said in that clip that I wanted to get your opinion on. First of all, they start by saying you disgrace us with what you stand for. They also mentioned you aren't close to being what our brothers are from the Renaissance period, and they actually mentioned that Renaissance period several times. One of the things I know that caught your attention was they specifically said that he was a slave being used to program the people. And lastly, they finished it by saying that no one man should have that much power. It almost sounds, when you listen to what they're saying, like they're the police. They're the guys that are in control, not Kanye, who's really, just making a lot of headlines with his, what I believe is foolishness. But these guys are interpreting it as something much more than foolishness. They're taking it much more seriously, and they seem to be taking a pretty big stand. So my question to you is, amongst many, is are these guys a part of or a product of the Illuminati, and how seriously should they be taken?
Okay, so the beginnings, and it's funny because I was involved in the beginnings efforts of Anonymous back in the day, in the early 2005, 2006. I remember when Anonymous was coming on the scene, and I remember being involved in a lot of the discussion groups that Anonymous discussion groups revolve around. Well, first, let's capture the idea of Anonymous. Anonymous is from the movie V for Vendetta. So if you haven't watched V for Vendetta, you won't understand what Anonymous is. And Anonymous is basically every single human being who wants to be free from the slavery of the system. And it's a very interesting movie because that's what it's about. It's about all the human beings getting together and saying, you know what, we're tired of this system on top of us, always keeping us down, always tricking us, always telling us BS. Because if you watch V for Vendetta and you see the news reports, you'll see that it is the Truman Show. It is actually exactly what I described to you.
Okay. So am I understanding you correctly? They seem to be against the Illuminati and what they're trying to implement. Would that be a true statement? Because it's confusing. It sounds to me like they're the controlling arm of this thing. But then based on what you're describing, they're not. They're actually against what these powerful entities are trying to do.
So this goes back to the concept of the Aurora Borealis, I think it's called, or something like that. It's called the snake eating its tail, and it's an ancient symbol of a serpent or a snake that eats its own tail. And what we are seeing coming into the fifth age, or V, the V is the Roman symbol for 5, V for Vendetta, the fifth age. We are entering the fifth age, and the serpent is eating its own tail. So what happens when the serpent eats its own tail is that all of these people who are at the very top of what they think is the Illuminati are going to end up being eaten by the very same system that created them. So yes, Anonymous is part of, unknowingly, unwittingly, part of the same system. They are being used to manipulate the current societal structure to create rebellion inside of the system. There is an intention to reduce the world's population by 5 billion people or more. And this can only come about through incredible sickness, incredible wars, incredible rebellion. And this is part of the prophecies that were given down to many of the members of these secret societies. So when you say, who is Anonymous? Well, Anonymous is everybody. And Anonymous is really a social movement that it tends to expose the people who are currently at the top of the system and undermine those people and create sort of like a French Revolution. That is their intent. That is their purpose. That is their drive. That is their energy. That's where they're going. Everything that you see is thought form, and thought forms that take life and energy to feed into those thought forms and create what we see in front of us. Okay, that sounds like very ambiguous, right? Like, what the hell are you talking about?
It does. And where do these guys congregate? Like 4chan? I mean, again, are there meetings? These are the things that, again, and I consider myself, and I don't mean to use this in a derogatory way because that's not my intention. But a big part of what keeps me from buying into a lot of the conspiracy stuff is common sense. And I'm not saying that you or anyone who supports a lot of these theories lack common sense. And maybe it ties into ego. Maybe it's me fighting my own ego, to support your point earlier, that's preventing it. Maybe my ego's too big to allow me to see what it is that you're trying to say. But these types of coordinated efforts, like when we talk about 9/11, when we talk about Anonymous, 9/11, if it was indeed, as you say, a government initiative perpetrated by the people in charge with a supporting cast, how many people would you estimate it would have taken to pull off an event like 9/11? Now, keeping in mind that 9/11 is a multinational effort. This was a coordinated effort that had to take place across different continents, okay? In my opinion, it's a huge effort. If you had to put a number on how many people it would have taken to pull off 9/11, what would that number be? Everything from the demolition, guys, because you believe like WTC-7, you believe that was a controlled demolition, so obviously you need demo teams. Even there's a lot of people that say the two main towers were also controlled demos because they fell straight down. They didn't, pile over or whatever.
I agree with that.
So you agree with that. So these are a tremendous amount of people. How many people would you say were involved in the entire 9/11 effort, from the executive level down to boots on the ground that were making it happen?
This is a very complicated question because and to give a number, right? People are going to say, well, you give a number. Let's say you say 3,000 people were involved in the coordination of this effort. That doesn't take into account this very useful concept that the government uses called that the societies use called compartmentalization.
The secret societies.
The secret societies use what's called compartmentalization. And if you're, like, say for instance, if you're a Mason, right, and the Masons is not really a secret society, but they have secrets. Okay, and each level or each degree that you go up inside of Masonry, you are revealed more secrets. And sometimes,
like Scientology.
Like Scientology, exactly. So Scientology, Masonry, there's many, many, many secret societies. And people feel this very exclusive, they're here they are, they're associating with all of these people who are the top people in society. And this adds weight to the whatever learning that they're getting from the secret society at that time. Every level that you move up, you're revealed new information. And sometimes, as you move up to the next level, some of the information that you revealed also reveals back down a level that you were lied to. So there is this game that is basically being played with people at all levels. At the end of the day, who is responsible for 9/11? Satan is responsible for 9/11. Who is responsible for Sandy Hook? Satan is responsible for Sandy Hook. Who's responsible for the Boston bombing? Satan is responsible for Boston bombing. There is a voice inside of each person's head, and the more you invest into that voice and listen to that voice, the more that you will be used for those purposes.
Gotcha. So in your response, which was fine, I didn't hear a number. I don't expect you to give me a number. I don't expect you to really know the number. But logically, the number's got to be in the thousands. And the reason logically it's got to be in the thousands is because if you go on IMDb and look up the Avengers, right? Look up the Avengers movie, and you go to cast and crew. They have a complete listing of their cast and crew. There's over 2,500 people on their cast and crew. Yeah. Just to make the Avengers, just to make a 2-hour movie. Yeah. So that would again, referencing back common sense, that would lead you to believe that to pull off 9/11, which would involve the media, because you've got to have cooperation, you've got to have media cooperation. It would involve cooperation from other governments. It would involve obviously boots on the ground, guys setting up demo units, guys. I mean, obviously you got to get the buy-in from the guys who actually took over the planes. It's just it's such a convoluted thing that it would be, in my opinion, well over 5,000 people minimum.
We don't know that there was anybody on any of those planes. We don't know. It's like anything that
I have a coworker. I had a coworker who lost a spouse on one of those planes. There was definitely somebody on those planes.
Well, like I said, I mean there is the idea that there are people on those planes, but we don't know that for certain. It's just like Mohammed Atta's driver's license that they found at the base of the World Trade Center in perfect, pristine condition. You can tell me that a plane can crash into the World Trade Center, that same plane can completely obliterate a building, but yet the license of the hijacker just happens to float down from that building in perfect condition and is recovered by the NYPD and shown off by the chief of police.
Listen, man, I'm not going to split hairs. You're right. That sounds odd. But whether this particular gentleman, again, this was a coworker who lost her husband on the Pennsylvania flight, whether he was killed outside of the plane or whether he was on the plane is irrelevant. The guy's dead. Yeah. Okay, he's dead. So again, it's almost semantics getting into the people that were on the plane.
Listen, it's just like anything else. When you see like the flight that was hijacked or the flight that went missing, the AirAsia flights that went missing, or the one that got shot down over the Ukraine.
Right, but the bigger point being, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the bigger point being, to pull off something as extravagant as that, to pull off something like the Boston bombing, this requires thousands of people, and I believe that we're living in an age where being a whistleblower, having a smoking gun, doing those different things is actually something that's almost being celebrated. You see it with the Snowden thing.
Quite to the contrary.
Okay, but in order to pull off an event where you're murdering 3,000 people... hold on, let me finish my thought. Yeah. In order to pull off an event where you're murdering 3,000 people, and it's an effort that's going to involve thousands of different moving parts, you're going to have to find thousands of different moving parts that have no conscience, that have no humanity, that are cold-blooded assassins.
Again, compartmentalization.
However you do it. Yeah. However you do it. Whatever threats are levied.
They don't understand the greater plan. So if you don't understand the greater plan, if all you're assigned
But once the plan is executed, they realize what they participated in.
Sure. And
okay.
And there's plenty of people who died after 9/11 that were associated with 9/11.
Okay, so you're saying that not one person could have gone to the local press. Not one person could have been the smoking gun, could have presented that. Not one person could have gone on a blog. Not one person could have. These are things that in today's society are impossible to contain.
I'm telling you that there are plenty of whistleblowers out there who whistleblow all the time about different things that have happened, and you will not hear about any of the real whistleblowers. Excuse me, when you see somebody like Edward Snowden and all the press and all the TV and all the BS that he is, you think, wow, yeah, look, he can run to Russia and he can say everything he wants to say. Well, what you don't know is that Edward Snowden is a CIA agent, that he works for the CIA, that he has self-admitted that he works for the CIA. So what you are dealing with is not someone who did a whistleblowing of the situation at the NSA for no reason. He is an asset of the CIA. He is someone who is a spy. He works in the trade. That is tradecraft. So the fact that he's going out there and saying something like that makes no difference, makes no hill of beans. It absolutely doesn't change anything. All it does is accentuate the fact that the people who you're listening to, the people who you're hearing on the news, that are supposed whistleblowers, the ones that get time on the TV, that they're not the real deal, that your reality is controlled.
Everybody has a cell phone today. Everybody has access to the internet. If I'm a guy who got hired to set up explosives in the World Trade Center, I'm taking a picture of that. Even if you threaten my family or whatever the case may be, I'm taking a picture of that. I'm doing it. And that picture's going to go viral without any question. Because as powerful as the government or the Illuminati or whatever you want to say is, things go viral all the time. It's something that's easy to happen. If it were me, and I'm just giving you an example, and I think I'm an average guy who thinks a certain way. If I got hired to set up, explosives in the, tallest buildings in New York City, I'm going to take a snapshot of that. And then I'm going to go back to my family and I'm going to say, this is what I was asked to do. And you were threatened and I want you to tell everyone in the family. And then I want you to tell everyone in the family to tell all of their friends. And I want you to make sure that their friends tell all of their friends. It gets to the point where when something gets that widespread, common sense tells you it's uncontrollable. Because someone within that group, you can't wipe out entire families. It doesn't happen, man. It doesn't happen.
I think, first of all, you are underestimating, first of all, the level of power and control that existed in 2001. And the reason why it occurred in 2001 as opposed to now, you have to understand that what you saw before you was not a fake event. It was a real event. It was definitely a real event. It's not like they faked the event, but it's very much like when the United States got into war with Spain. Okay, during the war with Spain, the ship, the USS Liberty, was sunk off the coast of Cuba, right? And Teddy Roosevelt used that excuse to set off, I'm sorry, not the USS Liberty, the USS Maine. The USS Liberty was sunk by the Israelis. The USS Liberty was sunk in the Havana Harbor by the same United States government. We sunk our own ship to create the impetus to get us into a war. Now, that is the idea of a false flag. The idea of a false flag is to create an event that so emotionally scars a populace that they give you their consent to be protected. And that is exactly what occurred after 9/11.
I get that. What I'm trying to say is that today's technology contradicts that particular effort. You can use Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook had, was it 21 or 22 children that were supposed to have been killed? Well, whatever the number is, I think it's 21. Let's say those 21 kids that you say there's no records of or whatever. That's been explained, by the way, many times over. But besides that, those 21 kids, those are 21 pictures of real human beings. Those weren't computer-generated images. Those are 21 children, okay, who, to support your point, if it was a hoax, would need to have disappeared. Because if they weren't killed in the shooting, they can't be running around today.
They are running around today.
They are running around today. So where are these 21 kids running around today?
If you watched the Super Bowl with the Ravens, you saw the kids. They were the kids in the Sandy Hook choir. Those kids who you see pictures of when they're 5 years old, okay, when they were 5 years old, at the time of the Sandy Hook event, they were 12 years old.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that also say that Lady Gaga is actually John Benet Ramsey. There's a lot of people that say that. There's a lot of there's many theories out there. I don't believe that. It's the first time right now in front of me. It's the first time I've heard anyone say that the 21 children killed in Sandy Hook were actually participating in the Super Bowl. That's astonishing. There's two things
hidden in plain sight.
Hidden in plain sight. Well, hell yeah. Apparently, there's two things that I think hurt, for lack of a better term, conspiracy theorists. There's two, and again, for lack of a better term. So I don't if people find that offensive, that's not my intention.
Before you come back to the hurt,
yeah.
Remember that when the Sandy Hook children came out, one of the pictures of the Sandy Hook children that they were using was not one of the victims, and that one of the mothers had to take to social media to expose the fact that the picture that they were using was her live daughter, and to explain to everyone to please take that picture off, that it was her daughter that was still alive and that she had nothing to do with Sandy Hook. And that's the way that picture was then had to be taken down and replaced by a new picture in the media. But before that, the media was claiming that child was part of the Sandy Hook event.
Yeah,
so if you're asking me,
if the
how
school
it's
gave him
possible,
if the school gave him a stock picture of the wrong child,
but the child didn't even go to Sandy Hook. They didn't have anything to do with Sandy Hook. The child had nothing to do with even the area. The child was from somewhere else, completely different, from Ohio or something. So what I'm trying to tell you is that while your perception of reality, you want to grasp on to this reality that you feel and hold firm to, because it feels that if what I'm saying is true, then it takes the rails off of everything that everybody is telling you.
Yeah, I think that it's very possible that one of these theories could be true. I can't deny that because I don't know that. I don't know that for certain. But I think I think there's two things that really hurt. And again, for lack of a better term, conspiracy theorists. I think there's two things that hurt them. One of them is everything appears to be a conspiracy. The Malaysia airline flight, Sandy Hook, Boston, 9/11, whatever. Any major event that seems to come up. We just mentioned the French plane, the crash in the French Alps.
Right.
I mean, that thing happened less than 48 hours ago, and you're saying it's a terrorist attack.
Well, I'm telling you what Sean Hannity was saying.
Okay, what do you believe? Do you believe that there's something behind it, or do you believe it was just a regular plane crash?
I believe that if Sean Hannity is doing the setup for it to be a terrorist attack, that information will come to light that it was a terrorist attack.
Okay, so there's one of the challenges I think that this
and then that means that yes, that the story is BS.
Okay, so the story is BS. So you see, that's what I'm talking about. It seems like whenever there's a cataclysmic event, man-made or otherwise, because the next thing might be, there's tsunamis that are being man-made, through explosives or whatever. But it seems
that's very possible. That's not even a theory. We know that that's possible.
Okay, right. So this is what I'm talking about. It seems like everything is a conspiracy, and that takes away, obviously, credibility. Everything cannot possibly be a conspiracy.
To think that we do not have the capacity to create a tsunami bomb is just simply ridiculous.
No, I don't disagree with that. You can set off nukes underwater. I know that. That's not what I'm debating here.
You don't need to set off a nuke. It doesn't have to be nuclear. It could just be a regular explosion.
However, it has to be something done by a government entity. It's not something you and I can do. You and I can't set off tsunamis. So it has to be a huge, powerful force that sets off a tsunami. Again, the point being, a tsunami is designed to kill people. Okay,
yes.
So again, the thought process being
rubbilize.
Right. Going back to what you were saying earlier, you said that there's apparently an effort to minimize the population by 5 billion or so, whatever that number was. So that's one thing that I think hurts credibility, is that everything seems to be conspiratorial. Everything's got some ulterior motive behind it, and nothing of any significance seems to happen just by coincidence. There was a shooting. There was a crazy person who decided to shoot some kids. No, it had to be something. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that hurts really and truly is a genuine smoking gun. Not a YouTube video, questioning what happened with WTC-7 or not. A true smoking gun.
What is a smoking gun? When you see a building that has not been hit by a plane free fall, if that's not a smoking gun for
Did you see that building get hit by debris? Did you see what hit that building? Did you see a video of that building standing in its position 45 minutes after the last plane struck the second tower?
Yes.
Okay.
The building did not come down until 6 hours later.
No, I know that. I know that. But what I'm asking you is if you watched, you had every angle of the building.
There's video of
No,
the building.
there is not. There is not every angle. There is not cameras surrounding that building.
Even if you did have angles, even if you had cameras in every single angle of the building, that does not account for a collapse of the entire building at free fall speed. The whole entire building. Think about what you're saying.
The two towers collapsed free fall straight down.
Of course, and that's ridiculous.
Okay. All right.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Think about the claim that you're making. You're saying that in no way, shape, or form is any part of that building going to sustain the damage that it was created to sustain.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to put World Trade Center 7 aside for a moment. Let me go back to the two towers. What would be the purpose of having them free fall straight down? The planes obviously went in. That's undeniable.
Right.
Well, what's the point of having them free fall? Why would they do that?
Why would they make the towers fall?
Why would they have? Why not just have them, just go over, peel over and crush everything around them? Why not?
I mean,
that would have been more devastating, right?
That is a valid question to ask.
Yeah.
I think that the destruction was centralized between those three buildings.
Why?
Well, there could run into some questions about insurance, about things that were insured for terrorist attacks, things that were not insured for terrorist attacks. Like, for instance...
So you're saying that the Illuminati was concerned about someone making insurance claims against them or something?
Absolutely.
That's ridiculous.
I think that the person who
ridiculous.
I think that the person who owned the World Trade Center at the time of its destruction is one of those very high elite people. He is the owner of Fairfield.
But why would he care if Joe's Pizza down the street got crushed by debris from the building keeling over? Why would he care?
Because when you're trying to compartmentalize, you need to control the situation. You don't need to bring in additional eyes to look into something that you are trying to control.
So you think that by the building falling over, it would have brought a higher level of scrutiny than the buildings just falling straight down?
Absolutely, because now you're not involving just one insurance company, right? You're not involving that insurance company and that insurance company's reinsurer, but now you're talking about damage that's being done to people who are not associated with the event. And therefore, like, say, for instance, a person across the street, he's not insured for a terrorist attack. Just like the World Trade Center wasn't insured for a terrorist attack until March of that year. And then all of a sudden in May, they get terrorist attack insurance when they never had terrorist attack insurance before.
I know. I've heard the whole insurance thing. My question...
None of the buildings around it had terrorist attack insurance.
Who cares? Why do people who are murdering 3,000 human beings care about the insurance policies of the pizza place right next door?
Because you are grasping to a concept about people who are murdering 3,000 people. These are not people who are murdering 3,000 people. These are people who are trying to set ablaze a new world order.
Exactly. They're trying to inspire what you said earlier, a westernization of the Middle East. They were basically trying to justify an excuse to get out there, to get people's buy-in on that.
Right. Why would
in my opinion,
contaminate that? Why would they want to contaminate that by bringing in outside eyes that have nothing to do with the business at hand?
But you're on one hand you're saying that, and on the other hand you're saying they're parading the kids from the Sandy Hook murders in the Super Bowl. They either want to be hidden or they don't want to be hidden. You can't have it both ways, brother.
One thing is hidden in plain sight, and one thing is
So what would be their motivation of parading the Sandy Hook murdered kids in the Super Bowl? What would be their motivation to do that?
To laugh at you.
To laugh at us. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, I think that if your purpose was to destroy these two towers to create a justification to go into the Middle East, I say more destruction is better. Have them fall over and destroy everything around them.
It's like all these bankers that you hear that they got shot in the head twice and the gun is in their left hand and they're righties. I mean, when that is a joke. That is an inside joke. Only the people who are paying attention pick up the inside joke. And if you're not paying attention, you will never pick up the inside joke. Just like when somebody's thrown off a building and that building represents something more, the name of that building or the number of that building, it has a representation, it has a meaning, it has something that it's being communicated more than just the actual event of throwing or of the person committing suicide and throwing themselves off the building. So your analysis of how incredibly impossible it is to coordinate such an event is valid if you hold only to the idea that these people are not extremely intelligent in the way that they execute their plans, that there is a complete network of them. They're not alone, that they're completely infiltrated in the vast majority of the media, that they control the process by which media disseminates the information, that the information that you're being disseminated on the news today is completely controlled, that you do not, and anybody who 20 years ago would watch Spanish language television and American television knew that the news that was reported on Spanish language television and the news that was reported on American television was completely different news. If you watch the news today, all of a sudden it's the same exact news.
Everything's unified. All right. One last question, because we're taking this thing to 2 hours. One last question. Has there ever been just out of curiosity, has there ever been a conspiracy theory that you've supported that after doing more investigating and more, more research on yourself, that you've come to the realization was in fact, not what you thought it was? Have you ever gone back on a conspiracy theory and said, we'll use 9/11. I know we obviously know where you stand on that. But has there ever been a theory like 9/11 where you've been like, hey, you know what? I went back, I researched it. Yeah, I was wrong on that one. Have you ever been wrong on any of the conspiracy theories that you've supported?
Okay, so when I support a conspiracy theory, I support an alternative mindset or alternative viewpoint on the way that we interpret reality. All the conspiracy theories are wrong, just like all the truth is wrong, because in reality, the world that we live in is an illusion of reality, and it goes back to what I was telling you before about how we are using words, we are using technology to create a false dynamic or a false existence. And in reality, none of this really matters. None of this matters in any way, shape, or form. That the only thing that matters is how much we can give of ourselves to our fellow people. And the reason that matters is because I am you and you are me. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that everything that you see is just a temporal existence, and that I am an eternal being who will not be constrained by the constraints of this reality, or even of this moment, or of any event on the TV, or any event, or even conspiracy theories that I should subscribe to. None of that holds me, because it's all fake. The only thing that matters is the truth of my eternal existence and my relationship to those who are truly existing eternally with me.
Man, that is deep. Well, I told you guys, if you didn't think this dude was interesting, you know now otherwise. Thank you so much, Jose, man. This has been a lot of fun for me, man. It's super, super interesting stuff. Again, we disagree on a bunch of it, but you present everything in a thoughtful, intelligent manner, and I think that's important. And we should always keep our minds open, even if we don't agree with stuff. It's always good to to have eyes on the back of our head, and just be looking around.
Absolutely, I appreciate you doing this show, and I hope that you have many more to come. It's getting more and more interesting.
You got to come back. You got to come back and spar with John, man. You guys would have a great time together. I'm telling you would.
Absolutely.
Promise to come back?
I promise to do it.
All right, man. Thank you so much, brother. Guys, we'll be back next week. Thank you. We're gonna have some cool guests next week. I think we're gonna get Ray Milian. You know Ray.
Of course,
Ray. Yeah, I'm going to probably have Ray on next week. We're going to talk about music, change things up a little bit. And
Ray is the man.
Ray's the man. It should be a lot of fun. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Peace.
Then a strange fear gripped me and I just couldn't ask.